Okay, good afternoon. My name is Matthew Stem, and I'm the Deputy Secretary for the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education at PDE. I want to thank each of you for being with us as we share exciting updates around the development of the Future Ready PA Index. We trust that you will find this session informative and valuable. So, today's session will begin with some brief background regarding the impetus for the new system of reporting student and school success. We will then highlight the role of stakeholders to this point in the process. We will also identify some of the guiding principles that resulted from these stakeholder conversations. And most importantly, we're going to launch the Future Ready PA Index demo site and provide an early look at this system. Although we're still finalizing the development, we believe it's essential to provide a first look so that users are aware of system design and functionality. And then we'll end with next steps, including some general timeframes as we prepare to move forward. So at the direction of Governor Wolf and with extensive feedback from stakeholders throughout the Commonwealth, the Department of Education created the Future Ready PA Index, a holistic tool that provides communities with a one-stop location for comprehensive information and data on student and school success. We know that what we measure in schools drives much of the experiences that are provided to students. And we heard from parents and educators alike that we need a broader set of indicators that foster meaningful and equitable educational opportunities. Beginning in 2016, we started engaging diverse groups to capture a vision of what this tool could look like. This included, folks in this group included parents and community members, school administrators, teachers, business leaders, and the others that you see on your screen. It was a very diverse group. And the conversations occurred through conferences, workshops, summits, symposiums, association meetings, and the like. And our goal was to ensure that we at the Pennsylvania Department of Education weren't simply creating a tool to push out, but we were collaborating with members of our communities in the development of a system to reimagine how we report student and school success. Then following that engagement, over the next 16 months during phase 2, we became even more targeted in our outreach. So through both live and virtual sessions, we sought critical and often very detailed feedback on things such as layout of the site and usability. This resulted in many design changes, and we will highlight those during the walkthrough. To those of you that have been involved in either our phase 1 or phase 2 efforts, I want to thank you for your role in shaping the development of this tool. As we've collected this feedback, we're very happy to report and share that our responses to date have been almost universally positive. In addition to formal stakeholder engagement, we've also been sending communications directly to our educators. These include guidance documents and toolkits, and we've provided multiple documents, everything from Q&A documents to documents on specific indicators. Beginning earlier this year, we also began sending e-messages out. We've sent 12 to date, and those are targeted towards superintendents, principals, and their teams with a higher level of detail around everything from our indicators and what they mean to how they apply to our new system. And finally, we've held a number of webinars on everything from chronic absenteeism to participation rate to PIMS data. So not only have we been engaging stakeholders, but we've also been sure to communicate in an ongoing way, specifically with our education community. So through many conversations, particularly during that phase 1 engagement that I mentioned, we were able to hone in on several key guiding principles that have served to focus our work. The first principle that really surfaced from stakeholder engagement was that our system should have a holistic set of measures. In other words, there should be less reliance on a single point-in-time assessment and other indicators of student school success. The other guiding principle that really surfaced through our conversations was the importance of ensuring that the tool that we create is a tool for continuous improvement, not just a snapshot in time, of numbers reporting student school performance, but actually a tool that could be used to engage communities in the continuous improvement process. Third, we heard that transparency is essential, and transparency particularly around the performance of all students. In Pennsylvania, we have not always had systems that are effective at highlighting the performance of each and every student at each and every school, and that was an important guiding principle for us in developing this tool. And then finally, the last guiding principle really has to do with the structure of the tool, and that is to ensure that the data that we present is clear and accessible. In other words, we heard particularly from parents that anyone should be able to look at a school's Future Ready PA Index page and have a sense of what areas are working well and what areas are in need of improvement, regardless of how much prior knowledge they may or may not have about education. And so that was an important principle as we developed this tool. So we hope that as we do the walkthrough, you will see these principles clearly evidenced. And at this point, we're exceptionally excited to begin our first public virtual walkthrough. So what you should see on your screen right now is the initial screen that one would see when logging into or going to the Future Ready PA Index website. So a couple things to be aware of before we start to engage in a virtual walkthrough here. First, be aware that all of the data that you're going to see is data that has been mocked up for the purposes of today's demonstration. So all of the real data will be entered when we actually do our launch. So just be aware that the numbers themselves are used for illustrative purposes. And the other thing to be aware of as we're walking through, right now, this walkthrough is occurring on a desktop computer. I'm running in a Chrome browser. Certainly Future Ready PA Index will be cross-platform in terms of browsers in a desktop environment. But also be aware that every page that you see and every link we're clicking is actually scalable across devices. And so we know that increasingly the use of this site is going to be on tablets and mobile devices. And so everything you see will be scaled in a way that is still easy to read and understand even on mobile platforms. And we think that that's going to serve our end users well. So the first time someone goes to log into the system, there will be a request to identify the role that best describes that individual. And this helps us at PDE get a sense of who is using the system as we continue to develop and refine it in the years to come. Here you'll see the list of potential roles of end users, and so for our purposes today, I'll select educator, and then from here, I will enter the site. Now, before I enter the site, I do want to make clear that you only have to do this one time. So unless you clear the cookies from your browser or your browser on mobile, this is a one-time identification. From here forward, you would always end up directly at the splash screen or the site landing area. So this is the site's initial landing page, and we know that the typical user is going into the Future Ready PA Index to look for information about a specific school. So the site landing page provides several different search methods that we're going to walk through. These are search methods that were requested by end users to help make their searches more intuitive and efficient. So the first way that someone would be able to identify a school is by going into the search function, and you can simply begin typing a school's name. So when I do that here, you'll see as soon as I put the first letter in, every school in our little mini database here with the letter E pops up on the screen. And then as I continue to type, they'll drop off until I see just the school that I'm looking for. So that will allow for quickly pulling up a school that one is searching for. The other way that that a school can be searched is by looking either at an IU region, a county, or a district level. So if, for example, someone wanted to look at all the districts and schools in a particular IU region, here we'll see all of our 29 IUs are populated, and by clicking any one of these would filter our results. Remember that in Pennsylvania there are over 2,800 public schools, and so we're trying to create an interface that allows for sorting through schools and finding groups and individual schools in an easy and efficient way. Here you can see where an end user can search by county and then also by district name. And we have all 500 school districts in the Commonwealth are listed in that list. And clicking any of these filters then through the master list underneath. There's also the ability to search for schools by location. And so here is a map of the Commonwealth. You can see as I hover over that it gives the name of the counties. When this is actually fully functional, up in the right-hand corner where it says 100 schools nearby, that will actually populate in real time, and we'll get a sense of the number of schools in any community. So when I click on Clinton County, that would give me the number of schools in Clinton County. So another way to search and identify schools. This was an interesting request and one that we were happy to build into the system. And that is to be able to identify our career and technical centers, both our comprehensive centers as well as our occupational or part-time CTCs. So if someone wants to find a CTC and may not even be aware of which of our regions have CTCs, either comprehensive or part-time, this is a place where one can go and immediately see all of the CTCs in the entire Commonwealth listed in one place as a resource. And lastly, as we did with career and technical centers, we do the same with charters and cyber charter schools. And one can click on the link for charters and cybers and see a list of all of the charters and cyber charter schools, both brick and mortar and cyber, in the entire Commonwealth. So hopefully you can see many of the intuitive ways a user can look for an individual school or look for groups of schools. Now I want to show you some advanced functionality that we believe is really transformational as a part of this tool. So we talked about guiding principles a few minutes ago, and one of those guiding principles was that the Future Ready PA Index not only be a snapshot of school performance, but more importantly, or equally importantly, be a tool that schools can use and communities can use to actually help schools improve. And so one of the areas that our development team has invested a significant amount of time in is this area called where we have more search options listed. So when we click more search options, what that brings up is a set of filters along the left side. And those filters are across three different areas. And I'm going to walk through each one of them. And I think as we do, it's going to become clear how powerful the ability to dig into the data this way can be. Whether you're a principal, whether you're a parent, whether you're a business and industry member, the ability to look for schools with common characteristics is something that we believe is going to be essential. So we'll start first with this section here on school information. So let's say that I'm the principal of a junior-senior high school. I'm going to be most interested as I look at for other schools and looking at comparing their performance and my performance in ways that could be helpful. I'm going to be most interested in looking at other junior-senior high schools. Remember, by the way, that junior-senior high schools are administering two different exams. They're administering PSSA exams, and they're also administering Keystones. So the importance of finding like schools is to being able to make apples-to-apples comparisons in terms of the data that one is looking at, because the data sets would be very similar. So I can grab the slider, and I can actually select any school that serves grades, serving grades 7 through 12. I could come back here and limit the search. If, let's say, I'm an intermediate center, grades 4, 5, and 6, I wouldn't have third grade PSSA data, but I know there are a lot of schools throughout the Commonwealth with an intermediate center type grade level configuration. And just by dragging that, what will happen on the right-hand side is, that list of 2,800 schools will quickly be filtered down to those with that select grade configuration. Then we control down even deeper. And so we can look at school size, very small schools from 0 to 400, all the way up to those schools with greater than 1,000 students. So I'm going to come back over here to our junior high school configuration and select a junior high with between 700 and 1,000 students. And now, as you can imagine, the list will continue to get filtered. Then we can look a little further. We could look at the school type, whether it happens to be a CTC, a charter, cyber, or a district, or we could simply leave that blank. We can also check off if we want to look at schools with a similar setting, urban schools, rural or suburban, and any combination. And by the way, as we apply these filters get applied progressively, so it's not a matter of choosing one filter or another. These become filters that are combined. Then there's also, maybe instead of looking at a particular setting, maybe a school wants to look for schools near them. So, I drop in within 50 miles and I can type our zip code, and now I can look for any junior, senior high schools that are large within 50 miles of my school. And again, our hope is, in doing this, we're starting to create professional networks and communities among our administrators and possibly even our teachers across the entire Commonwealth who are serving students in similar settings. Then if we click to demographics, this allows us to get even more precise in configurations. So if I want to look for schools that have a Black population between 40 and 60%, Hispanic population between 10 and 20%, and a white population between 20 and 30%, I can drop the sliders accordingly and really begin to narrow down the list of schools. As a side note, the terminologies that we use across each of our demographic categories are consistent with our civil rights data collections. So just to be aware, as we use terms, these come directly from the manner in which we do reporting for civil rights data collection. And you'll see that all of the subgroups that are a part of civil rights data collections are listed, including economically disadvantaged, English language learners, and students with disabilities. And in each one of these, we can apply the filters to find similar schools. And then lastly, and in some respects, really, I think this is where a lot of the power comes into this ability, is now that we've identified a set of schools with common characteristics, now as a user, again, whether I'm a parent, a community member, an educator, I can now pull up schools that have achievement in certain areas that meets the criteria that I'm looking for. So if I want to find out where are the schools like mine that have achievement among in achievement proficient or advanced in mathematics at 80% or greater, I can move the slider over and get a clear sense of who those schools are. And hopefully, if I'm at a school that's not exhibiting that high of a level of performance, I've now positioned myself to reach out to some of those schools and share best practices and get a sense of what it is that's working, where the investment of resources is, and what the interventions and programs are that are yielding those types of results. For right now, for the demo purposes, you can see the percent proficient or advanced in English language arts, biology, and math, as well as our PVOS scores. However, when we launch, we will actually have more of our indicators here that go across all of the categories of the Future Ready website. So At the end of the day, this feature has been met with great enthusiasm by those that have seen screenshots to this point in time. And again, we're even more excited now to be able to show what it will actually look like in action. So let's come back to our main search screen for a minute. And now we're going to pull up and identify a specific school. So for our example, we'll pull up Green Middle School in the Franklin School District. And once a specific school is selected, the school landing page is shown first. So this is our school landing page. Information found on this page specific to a school focuses on a snapshot of our federally required indicators. So the indicators you see in front of you here are those that are federally required. This is important to note that one of the other guiding principles we mentioned earlier was the clear and accessible presentation of data. So one of the things that we were sensitive to and that we heard particularly from parents was they wanted to see an initial snapshot of school performance as soon as you log into a school, not having to go to a lot of different places and a lot of different pages, but giving us, here's a first glance of what's happening. And that's what this screen serves to do across all three categories and across our federally required indicators. At the top here, we have our keys for our progress measures. And I'm going to explain that in just a moment. Before I do, let me go back. I also want to note that this is also the screen where if a school has been identified for either as a school in need of comprehensive support and improvement, CSI, or a school in need of targeted support and improvement, TSI, this is the screen where that will also be noted so that a parent or community member that goes onto a site will immediately be aware if a school is in either CSI or TSI status. That's important to note. So if we go to the key for progress measures, you'll see there are two conditions that are being measured under each indicator. One condition is their progress towards goals. And so a school is either going to be blue, green, or red. We've only set 3 conditions, and this goes back again to the theme of being simple and easy to understand. If a school receives a blue on any particular indicator, that means that they're meeting or exceeding the statewide goal on that indicator. And in simple terms, blue is a very good thing. You'd like to see blue if you're an end user. Green indicates that a school is meeting or exceeding their improvement targets or improvement targets. So green means you haven't yet hit the long-range goals, but that more or less you're making progress towards that goal in a manner which will get you there. So green indicates you're on your way to eventually meeting the statewide goal through your improvement target. And then finally, the last condition is not meeting your statewide goal or improvement target. And this means that not only have you have not hit the statewide goal, but you're also not making improvement at a rate which will get you there. And so in very simple terms, if someone is looking for the first time at a school's page, you want to see blue and green, and you would not want to see a lot of schools in red across all indicators. The additional data, the additional condition that we make note of as well, and this was actually not a part of our original design and came from feedback from both parents and school administrators, was the notion of current and previous performance comparisons. And so not only do you get a color coding, but an up arrow indicates an increase in performance from the prior year. No arrow, just simply a dot, means that a school has maintained the same performance on that indicator when compared to the prior year. And a down arrow means that there's a decrease in performance on that indicator when compared to a prior year. So for example, if we look at one of the things that we heard that had led us to adding this functionality is you may, for example, have a school in the red on a particular indicator, And although they haven't made sufficient progress to hit their improvement target, they may be red, but the up arrow may indicate that the change from the prior year is an increase in achievement. And it gives a sense of what that comparison is year over year. Or in this case, for example, if we look at this fictional school, we know that not only has this school met the academic growth expectations and exceeded the growth expectations, we also know that it's represents an increase over the prior year. Now we know these are different groups of students, but they at least give one snapshot of that change from one year to the next. Now what I'm going to do is take us to a deeper dive. So this is the very quick snapshot of a school's performance, but this now leads us to look and take next steps with much more detailed information. So I'm going to look at state assessment measures, and you see we click this link underneath, and that will take us to a screen that now starts to unpack with a greater level of detail, but hopefully maintaining the same clarity. We're going to spend more time on the state assessment measures than on the OnTrack and college and career measures. So because what I'm going to share here will hold true when we look at those other indicators as well. So the first thing that we'll note is that on this screen, there are three different measures under assessment measures. We have the percent proficient or advanced on Pennsylvania's assessments. We also have the annual growth expectation target, or PVOS, and then at the bottom we have the percentages of students scoring advanced on state assessments. You'll notice that the cells are approximately the same size and follow the same structure. So the top of the cell provides information about the all student groups rating or progress towards goals for that indicator. So we carried over, you see how we have the green, red, and green here. Those are carried over from that initial snapshot we saw, but now we're going to explain a little bit more about what's happening under each that leads to that green, red, and green label. And then that carries through for both the PVOS. And then when we get down here to state assessments, you'll notice that these are all gray indicators. And the reason that these are colored gray is that these are informational items. And so we know that many in the educational communities want to know what the percent of students are advanced are across indicators, in addition to just knowing the proficient or advanced. So we provide that information as well as the statewide average to give that additional context for what's happening in a school. So as we look more closely, we're going to take a look at the state assessment measures even more closely, because there's additional information that really gets more precise around what's happening at a given school. So across the top here, for each one of the assessments, English language arts, math, and biology, we're reporting out the percent proficient or advanced, and that's the top number. So here we've got 60.2%, 39.4%, and 54.8%. But what we're also reporting out is our statewide averages to give a little better sense of what is happening at this given school contextually against the rest of the state. Now remember, if we wanted to do advanced functionality, instead of just comparing this school against a statewide average across hundreds or thousands of other schools, we could run the same sorts of comparisons against schools with similar characteristics. But this is the initial snapshot. And then underneath the statewide average is the statewide 2030 goal. And this is where we highlight where we're trying to move all schools and try and give that visual representation of how far individual schools and, quite frankly, the state as a whole have to move to close that gap and hit our 2030 targets. In addition to what I just shared with you, one of the other functions that we added, probably one of the more recent developments in the tool, was this last button underneath here. And this is unique to our state assessments. And this is our state assessment participation. So we know that in some schools, for a variety of reasons, they may have some students that do not participate in the test, whether for whatever reasons. So this clicking on this button would show not only, so we know that 60.2% of students are proficient or advanced, but this would give us a sense of how many students actually took the test, which is an important piece of additional information, particularly if a school is not at 100%. So above the state assessment participation is our student group breakdown. And this is, if we had to say one element of the tool which has yielded the greatest positive feedback, it's this ability to look at subgroup performance across indicators. And this goes back to our guiding principle around transparency of performance, and it's reflected in this design. So if I go back for any one of our indicators, we can choose our student group breakdown and now not only know, for example, that 60.2% of students in this given school were proficient or advanced on their English language arts assessment, but we can also go through and see how different groups of students performed. And so here in this case, our Hispanic students were lower than the all-student group, and although had met their target, the change year over year was a downward trend. Was a downward comparison, not a trend, but the change from the prior year. Our white students' performance underneath, we could look at economically disadvantaged, and in this school, students with disabilities. Anywhere you see an IS, that indicates that there was an insufficient sample, which means there were not at least 20 students that were in that group of students at a particular school. We carried back over the key for the progress measures, so even though we had this on the initial landing page, we've also included that here, so that if someone in looking at an indicator needs to remember that an up green arrow means meets or exceeds a statewide goal, and an increase in performance from the prior year, they can click up top and be reminded of what it is that they're looking at. And this is a level of disaggregation that we've never provided before, and particularly not in a manner that we believe is easy to navigate and simple to understand. I'll move more quickly through the next through the next two categories. So the next category, OnTrack Measures, this is where we're looking at our English language proficiency among English learners, looking at our regular attendance, and I'll pause there just as a reminder that when we look at regular attendance, we're actually going to be measuring the percentage of students that attended school 90% or more of the days that they belonged. So this is not an average daily membership indicator. It's actually measuring the rates of chronic absenteeism. And we believe that's critically important in ensuring that individual students or groups of students are not disproportionately missing school, and more importantly, ensuring that all students are moving towards becoming regular attenders. And then last, you'll see here that as an informational, not a rated item, but as an informational item, we have a grade 3 reading indicator and a grade 7 math indicator. I'm going to go back. This is a good opportunity to show how easy it is to navigate through schools. I'm going to go up here to find a school, and I'm going to pull up a high school for the final illustration, because our high schools are those that are going to have more indicators of college and career measures. And I think it's, for illustration purposes, it's a little bit more helpful. So there are several indicators on this page, the first one being the career standards benchmark. Then we move down and we look at cohort graduation rates. So, and I want to take a moment to explain this. We have the 4-year cohort graduation rate that is tied in particularly to our federal accountability, as you can see here. But we also feel it's very important to unpack our 5-year cohort graduation rate as well. We know we have schools and districts that may have high numbers of students that are returned back to school over age or for a variety of reasons are not able to graduate in 4 years. We also have students with IEPs who have an additional year or more built into their IEPs. And so this allows us as an informational item to report out 5-year cohort graduation, and we believe that's important. And again, all of these can be broken down by student group. We then have our industry-based learning indicator, and this is one, we believe our administration department, and this is reflected, particularly we hear this from business and industry members, that we've got to elevate our career pathways related to career and technical education. And when we look at our industry-based learning indicator, what we're actually looking at is what is happening in schools in terms of the achievement on NOCTI or NIMS exams, competency exams, but also the percentage of students receiving industry-recognized credentials and the percentage of students completing work-based learning experiences. We said at the beginning that what we measure is what drives, we know is what drives practice in schools, and we hope that by measuring and reporting out on the industry-based learning indicator that we're going to incentivize schools and communities to have conversations about the opportunities that students are receiving and their performance across these measures that are very much tied to career pathways and living wage career pathways in many cases as well. The additional item on the right here is also reporting out specifically the percent advanced on industry-based competency assessments. So just like we did with PSSAs and Keystones, we know that students that score an advanced on their NOCTI or NIMS exam are going to be exceptionally well prepared, not only for the workforce, but also students that are well prepared if they do decide to go to a 2 or 4 year college or some other sort of post-secondary learning opportunity. Underneath that, we have another critically important indicator of college and career readiness, and that's our rigorous courses of study. And here we're looking at two different things. First, we're looking at course offerings and the percent of rigorous courses of study that are being offered at schools. So when we talk about courses of study, we're talking about not only AP and IB courses, but we're also talking about college course enrollment. Some of you may know as dual enrollment or dual credit courses, but please take note that we've also included CTE programs of study. Those students that are concentrators, we consider that to be a rigorous course of study, and we've elevated it as such. So this measure is really gauging access to those courses and then enrollment and taking a look at what percentage of students are enrolled in AP/IB, what percent are enrolled in dual credit programs, and what percent are enrolled as concentrators in CTE programs of study. And last is our post-secondary transition to school, military, and work. And, this is an indicator that educators and community members have been trying to get a hold of for quite some time. And for those of us that were educators in the field, we've tried everything from surveys to social media to a variety of strategies to try and figure out what's happening with our students after they graduate. And at the department and through collaboration with some of our other agencies, we've now been able to get a hold of data sets that allow us to show what's happening with our graduates 16 months after they graduate. And what we're looking at is what percentage of graduates at a given school find themselves either enrolled in post-secondary education, enlisted in the military, or entered into the workforce. So this is the overall number here where you see the 67.3%, but then the breakdown underneath gives a sense of what that distribution is of graduates who find themselves in one of those three one of those three places. Also note that these are not mutually exclusive, so it's rare that these will ever add up to match. So if we were to add these, you can see that they're not going to add up to 67.3%. They're going to exceed, because a student could very well be enrolled in post-secondary and also enlisted in the military, or in the workforce and also enlisted in the military and the reserves, or any combination of these. So we are, I've said this before, but I'll say again, we're very excited to be able to get this data and these snapshots into the hands of our superintendents, our principals, our school boards, our parents, our business and industry members, and we hope and trust that as we provide this information, and remember, go all the way back to what we said at the beginning, that we now have the ability to find similar schools and then look at these indicators and compare up to 8 schools at a time. By the way, we can lay them side by side in this tool, and hopefully start to lead to strategic planning and critical conversations and collaborations across sectors that are really going to move the needle on preparing our students for college and career readiness. So with that said, the last things that we'll very briefly highlight here are these 2 tabs at the top. So everything we've been talking about, I'm just going to go back for a minute to school performance. Everything that we've been talking about to this point has been through either state assessment measures, OnTrack measures, or college and career measures. The other 2 tabs that you'll see here provide school information. And so this is our school fast facts page. And you'll see demographic information about the enrollment of students here in this section. You can see percent enrolled by ethnicity. I can hover over each of the sections on this pie chart, and it will reflect and point back to the data that's disaggregated underneath. We've got gender as well. We get a sense of the grade levels, the enrollment of the school, percent gifted. You can see all of that on your screen. We've also included a link to Google Maps, so that when you, oftentimes someone looks up a school, and particularly if they're, let's say, have stumbled upon a school because they used one of those advanced search functions, hasn't really heard of the school, maybe he's not really even familiar with the county, you can click on the map and it will launch you right out to Google, and you can take a virtual tour of the area in which that school finds itself. So we thought that would be helpful. But equally important, if not more importantly, you see a link here underneath called School Website. And one of the things that we heard, especially from our educators, but from parents and board members and others, was that there's a lot happening at schools that we're never going to be able to capture and communicate on a school fast facts page. So when you see the school website link, we're actually going to build in the links to all of our schools' websites, so that an end user who becomes interested in a school can click here and learn more about extracurricular offerings, calendars of events, schools that are doing amazing things in STEM and makerspace and news briefs and all sorts of information that we would never be able to put on Future Ready, but we've put it in one place to hopefully launch folks out and get that traffic over to schools' websites for a holistic picture of what's happening in those schools and communities. And finally, there are district fast facts, and you can see we used the same type of format that we did for school fast facts, but this is now district level data, as well as links to some state and federally required reporting. So I'm going to take us back now to the PowerPoint presentation and talk about where we're at in terms of next steps. So next steps, we are in the late summer. We have just about completed our quality control calculations for some of our initial indicators. We'll continue running quality control throughout the weeks ahead, and know that in terms of quality control, we've actually designed parallel calculation systems that go right down to the student level, so that we're doing everything we can to mitigate any data errors and make sure that our data is deadly accurate. So those efforts are in full swing. We also have our data preview window, that's going to be coming up for superintendents within the next few weeks, and it's going to begin by looking at graduation and attendance data, career readiness data, and fast facts data as the first look at and preview of data. Early this fall, we're going to be finalizing our assessment data. And the reason that is ongoing is because due to the sophistication of the ways that we're disaggregating our data, we have many new data runs and calculations that the team is compiling this year, and so we know that we've anticipated the extra time that is going to take, but we'll be finalizing the disaggregation of assessment data and beginning to do the school and district level calculations from that data. So then late fall, there will be a second data preview window, and that's where our superintendents will be able to preview, and their teams, their assessment data, their proficiency and growth data, CTE data, and courses of rigor. And following that data preview window, we then anticipate launching our Future Ready PA Index. And it's the culmination of up to 2 years or more of planning, and it will then be the time to launch it and get this tool into the hands of everyone in the Commonwealth. So as we close, I sincerely hope that this walkthrough has been informative. Know that we truly believe that the Future Ready PA Index is going to have a transformative effect on teaching and learning, and will establish the conditions that allow our administrators, teachers, and other educators to collaborate with parents and community members in preparing our students for greater success in the years ahead. If you have any questions regarding this presentation, they can be sent to the link on the screen. That's ra-edfuturereadypa@pa.gov. Thank you again for taking the time to watch this webinar and watch this video, and we look forward to launching this tool later this fall. Thank you.